Good morning, everyone. This is a meeting of the Act 279 Working Group. Today is Friday, September 15th. This is our 10:30 hearing here in Conference Room 329 and also online virtually. The purpose of today's meeting is to receive an update from the Department of Hawaiian Homelands on their progress that they're making on expending down the funds for Act 279. We have Representative Daniel Holt with me today in person. We have Representative David Tarnas online. Welcome, Representative Tarnas. We also have Representative Mahina Poi Poi online. Thank you for joining us, Mahina. And we also have Representative Jean Ward that just joined us here, and Representative Scott Nishimoto is excused for today. So I think before we begin, I just want to announce that, I think at the beginning of when this Act 279 group was formed, I think there was some discussions about when the appropriation of this bill was going to lapse. And so I think we had some discussions this legislative session about, technically what does it mean, because I think there is a date in there that may not be correct in terms of when the actual lapse date is. So we did request a formal opinion from the Attorney General, and the Attorney General did get back to us and said that it does lapse indeed on June 30th of this year. So if there is any extension, we will have to go in and force lapse the funds and then reappropriate whatever's left. So I think there was some hope that it would last until possibly 2025, but I think now we got some clarity, so at least we know what we have to do over the next couple of months of making sure that things are encumbered, or if we have a plan of forced lapsing and reappropriating on what those projects are. So I think just to review, I think the last time you came before this body, you gave us a good number of what was encumbered for the end of June 30th. So hopefully we'll get an update on what that number looks like now, and how much we're spending that encumbrance down. And so I think it will be good to get this presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Watson. I think we have a PowerPoint for us this morning to give us some understanding of where we stand at the moment. So Chair Watson, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman, as well as members of the committee. Appreciate our opportunity to do this presentation and give you an update as to the status of not only the projects, but also, with the PowerPoint, maybe kind of make it easier, especially for those tuning in, to understand by island what projects we're specifically looking at. So we get that started.
Just give us a second. All right, there we go.
Thank you. Basically, involving the $600 million under Act 279, that's what we're dealing with here. Next slide. So our first island, Oahu, we have about 6 projects from the Mill Camp all the way to Eva Beach. Next project. Where's the slide? I guess probably the most exciting one of all the projects is that involving East Kapolei. We did put out a RFQ. We're in the process. We've gotten 2 major responses. So we're vetting the 2 applicants, or those that have submitted their qualifications, and both are well qualified. So as you can see, the idea on this one was to incorporate 4 of the parcels, both C, D, E, and F, to generate about 548 single-family residential units. On that, with respect to Act 279, we budgeted about $109 million, which costs or is reflective of approximately $200,000 per unit regarding infrastructure. So with respect to the cost of the vertical construction, that would come in the forms of loans. We're also requiring a developer to take a look and use the LIHTC rent-to-own approach, as well as work with Habitat, as well as put so many lots aside for the owner-builder, those that are interested coming off our wait list to build their own homes.
Could I ask clarification? Did you say 200,000 per unit minus?
For infrastructure.
Okay. Oh, for infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Not the house.
Not the house. Totally separate.
Okay.
Yeah, so the house cost would be dependent upon which program they go under. You know, if it's a turnkey, we anticipate about 440,000 per house. Vertical construction costs, that's a guesstimate, but that's roughly what we're looking at. Again, if they're using a LIHTC, there's no mortgage. It's just based on their income. If they're working with Habitat, you know, they have a nice loan program, 0 interest, I believe, provide insurance. And the owner builder, you know, it's, we just set standards, and they would do their own thing, working with probably a, you know, bonding company. So with respect to this project, also I wanted to note that increment 2A, which is on the bottom, the light green, that one we're going to get a little more innovative. We'll do multi-units. So those are going to be rentals directed at probably Kupuna, as well as people coming that are on our wait list that need to be prepped. We're looking at also putting in a kind of like a neighborhood commercial center with multi-service center programs in there, and that can service you know, all the. I mean, we got quite a few residents. We got 4 other homesteading communities, so it's kind of would be very appropriate. Next slide. This one, the lot is next to Kapolei High School. We've already purchased this lot from HHFTC for a little over $8 million. Again, we budgeted about $11.9 million. We have chosen a developer using the RFQ process, and that again, the Act 279 will help facilitate the development of this project. Keyed in is the $11.9 million, which would go again to the infrastructure costs, roughly about $200,000 per unit. Next slide. This one is a former Voice of America property in Maili, involving about 40 acres. Again, we'll probably do just single family on this rather than multi-units. And then we're intending to put out an RFQ on this one also before the end of the year. We've allocated part of the 279 to cover the infrastructure costs. And this one should generate between more like 250 units, residential units. Next slide. This particular site next to Eva Beach Golf Course is pretty nice. It's close to the ocean. But however, there are some access, sewer, and traffic and drainage issues that might cause this one to be kind of pushed back a little bit because of those issues. But it is part of our strategic identified plan project, which our commission approved. So we're going to take a look at it until we get to the point where it just needs to, especially we looking at other projects based on the ability under Act 279 to acquire new lands. And those lands that we've been looking at are very actually great lands that are close to infrastructure. Costs are a lot less, and a lot of them are ready to go. So, you know, it's a selection process as well as a process that makes the most sense, not only financially, but more in how quickly we can get people off the wait list by actually building these houses. Next slide. This is the Wailua. This is part of a 3-phase project, 3 or 4 phase, excuse me. And this one, yeah, 3-phase. We're in phase 3. It involves about 108 single-family units at the old mill plantation site. And so this, again, we're using the money to acquire. And this one is a good example where we've used the money to acquire new lands in Wailua, which is a great community, great location. Be a new homesteading community, which is also very exciting. Then the infrastructure cost is a little bit less per unit, but again, this would be where the homesteader would get their own loans program. We're looking at, with respect to the loan programs, we're working with you know, HUD on the 247. We've gotten authorization on the 184A. We're working with American Savings Bank. They just got certified as a facilitator and processing those kind of loans. And we're working with various CDFIs to also do that. Then we also have our direct loan programs, and we're looking also to use the Act 279 money to either buy down the interest rate or provide subsidies to get more people qualified based on their income that might otherwise be bypassed because they don't make enough money. So this is, again, thanks to you folks, and the flexibility on the use of the Act 279 allows us to do that. As you can see on the next slide, that's kind of the purple is our site, about 109 units. And that's, and we're in the third phase. Next slide. On Kauai, we have two major projects, one in Anahola and the other in Hanapepe. Next slide. The first, which we had a groundbreaking, is the project in Hanapepe, which is actually phase 2 of this particular site. Kind of funny because I was involved in phase 1, and that was over 20 years ago. Thankfully, with your funding, we were able to get into phase 2 now, finally. And so this one, we've awarded the infrastructure construction contract. And so we're also in the process of putting our RFQ to choose a developer to do the vertical construction and kind of dovetail the two. And yeah, again, the development process, I'm kind of tweaking it because typically the department has done one and then, done the next phase, and that just doesn't make sense. We want to combine the two to lessen the chance of discrepancy between the infrastructure and the vertical contractor, and more importantly, consolidating these different parcels, like in Kapolei, where we combine 4 parcels to do 548 units versus on this one it's only 82, although it's designed to do over 300. Again, this one was more a reflection on the market on Kauai, not as large a waiting list like Oahu. So this one, I think this is appropriate based on not only the market, our wait list, but more importantly, we want to make sure that the lots and units are filled with individuals. First phase, we actually did habitat, and some of the homesteaders were from Ni'ihau, so that was kind of a nice first-time experience to actually pound nails with Hawaiians from Ni'ihau, and we'll probably use the same approach on a few of the lots regarding working with habitat, and that's going to kind of be a standard approach with our projects where we partner up with habitats, self-help contractors, and thereby the overall idea is to avoid bypassing people on the waiting list. Next slide. This one in Anahola, this is a little bit of a different approach. These are Kuleana subsistence ag lots. The lots aren't as big, but I think it's more conducive use-wise for our homesteaders coming off the ag wait list. Their size such that they're not overburdened with a large homestead lot like we find in Molokai, where they were awarded 40-acre lots. And today we can see the results of that, where a lot of individuals and homesteaders aren't able to develop and use a full lot. And so by doing it in a more palatable, more viable approach, I think it's a lot more appropriate. This one does not have potable water, so that's something that makes it a Kuleana wait list. Without potable water, it's very unlikely, although they can, put a residence on it. But in this one, more likely they'll just use it for ag. Then also in this one, we're having looking to get some people off our pastoral wait list. So we're going to make some pastoral awards. Act 279, we budgeted about $5 million for the infrastructure work on that. Next slide. On the Big Island, we got 2 major projects. Village of Waiopua, and then the Honomu subsistence ag lots in Kaumana, which is really a land acquisition. Next slide. Yeah, on this one, one of the challenges was getting water, and water has been a real kind of in fact, the development in general. If you don't have the water, you won't be able to develop. So we've been forced to kind of identify sites, and in this case, for villages 1 and 2 primarily, we needed to get some additional water. So thankfully, you folks appropriated some money through a legislative CIP appropriation, 9.9 million, which we're using to acquire a site to develop a water source. We need about 400 water credits for villages 1 and 2, and so this will assist in that. I might want to add that the decision-making as well as the process of approving use of water, especially in designated management areas, requires this CWRM to make approval. We are submitting some legislation whereby I'd like to be on that board, and I think not only that board but also HHFTC as well as HCDA. So I'm putting a plug today regarding, hopefully you guys will be supportive of me going on these boards, so I can kind of not only lobby but educate the boards as to the importance of making various, whether it be funding, water, or whatever, or additional lands, or ability to development our lands by these different boards. And so, anyway, next slide. And this one is, Laopua in more detail. One of the most, I guess, creative but effective way of addressing the people on our wait list that are moderate or low income is to use these low-income housing tax credits with the option to buy. And so in this project, as you can see, we've kind of emphasized that in Village 4 and Village 5 with over 200 or close to 200 awardees using that route. And then we also, in addition to that, the department is in the process of doing the infrastructure for Village 4 involving 125 lots, which Non-Inc. is putting in. And then in Village 5, we have a variety of lots that are using different approaches. That one, we're kind of working with a small native wine developer to move those along. And so we'll also, again, be working with Habitat and get that particular project going or moving forward. Next slide. Like Kapolei, what we're doing is we're trying to combine these different parcels and putting out RFQ to get a developer that can build, in this case, 525 units, both Village 1 and 2, which involve 200 lots per, and then Village 4, which has 125 lots where the infrastructure is almost finished being completed. So for a total of 525 units, we're going to put out an RFQ to identify a developer that can, and it has the capacity to do all 525 units at one time, obviously phasing them, but a lot quicker than going in piecemeal as we've done in the past. So on this one, we budgeted about $267 million of Act 279 to move this one forward. So next slide. Again, a little bit the ag subsistence approach. On this one, in Honolulu on the Big Island, we have a phase 1 and 2 involving 1 acre lots, and again, subsistence type. We can go all the way up to 3 acres, but we've decided 1 acre is more than adequate to allow the homesteader to maybe, when we call it subsistence, it's really to raise food and crops for themselves. They can also have animals on their lot. So I think, we did one recently in Panieva involving 16, and it was well received. We had the UH department there to provide counseling on what kind of crops to grow for that particular area. We also had, in that case, it was allowed, or the homesteader was allowed to build a house, and that involved half-acre lots. And so because it's such a large lot, they can build a big house and accommodate not only themselves but their ohana. And so that one also, we had lenders there to not only talk about our NAHAZA loan program, but again, the 184A loan program. We also had American Savings Bank there to not only educate the recipients about the different choices they have, but more importantly, use it in a way that I think is more reflective and more popular, and I think more viable for the people on our ag wait list. Now we budgeted about $6 million for the infrastructure. Next one. Okay, this is a site acquisition. We used the $2 million to acquire some lands in Kaumana, which is adjacent to the yellow is our property that we have in inventory. The red is what we recently acquired. This one was in response to RFP. In looking at the proposal, which included the development, we felt that the development costs were not viable or appropriate. So we offered to just acquire the land, and the developer was willing to do that. So we proceeded on that. So we got some additional lands in Kaumana. Maui, we have about 5 projects. We're excited about Maui. I mean, we've been very, very aggressive in addressing our wait list. In next slide. This one we already had a groundbreaking, and the infrastructure is already going in. This one was next slide. And we had some good-looking guys there. So in the celebration on the particular project, we got 161 units. This one was kind of nice in that we were able to use some of the affordable housing credits to finance the property acquisition. We're also using the $22 million for infrastructure. And then again, we're using that varied approach that I mentioned with the habitat, as well as the turnkey gap financed mortgages, as well as the LIHTC rent to own, and then also owner builder. So those hopefully will start construction of the vertical units in April, or at the latest in July of next year. Next slide. And this one is actually right above the Pu'unani project that we just previously looked at. This one involves about 207 single-family residential, again using the same approach with the variety of choices for people on the wait list. Under Act 279, a little over $45 million is already encumbered for this particular project. Next slide. And this is just a kind of an extension of the different phases that we've been doing in Wai'ehu Ko. This one would involve over 400 units, which would primarily be single-family residential, but we're also making some rural agricultural lots also available in the upper sections of the property. And again, we've already encumbered $93 million on this particular project. Next slide. This one on the Leali'i, this is actually phase 2. The 104 lots in phase 1 were already built. They fortunately withstood the Maui wildfire. Of the 104 units, only 2 were destroyed. And so we're in the process of replacing those, working with the homesteaders. And then the others we've met with, and we're kind of addressing some of the concerns regarding the water as well as the air quality. And then we're looking to looking at maybe replacing their roofs, and then also maybe incorporating some PV installments to reduce their electrical costs. So that's something that's ongoing. This one, we have some money that was previously awarded through CIP, the $9 million, and we're using that to put in the highway and parkway improvements going up between phase 1 and phase 2. And we will probably cut back on the number of units because the original design, we were looking at using or doing some multi-units, but we've decided on this one, and partly based on our discussion with the community out there, they would prefer a single family, and they don't like rentals. And so we're just gonna just keep it to single family, and I think it was 180 units around there. And that, you know, in the process of finishing up the environmental assessment, and I just also want to emphasize that even with the emergency proclamation, we are, as a department, very, very sensitive to the, obviously, you know, we service Native Hawaiian, so obviously we would be very sensitive to cultural and historical and archaeological sites. So that's something we are not going to compromise on regarding the process. However, we are submitting some legislation to address the delays, especially with SHPT, and because of their, I guess, challenges and staffing and what have you. So we, in our legislation, we're submitting proposing that the department take on that responsibility, not short-sighted or not, you know, do it in any lesser intensive and complete and thorough analysis, but more so just the process. We'll follow the process, but do it in-house and make sure it's done in a timely fashion so we can move our projects along, which unfortunately on some of our projects are being delayed because of the delays in SHPT. So to address that, that's one of the legislation we're looking at putting forward. Next slide. Subsistence ag lot, this one, you know, we're looking at putting in some water sources, as well as, you know, moving things along with not only water sources for Hunakawai, but water would also be used to provide drinking water for phase 2 in Leali'i. So they're kind of connected. Huh? Not only does it help the, next slide, the subsistence ag lots, the light green, or the green lots shown in there. We do have some plans for possibly some residential ag, as well as maybe even an industrial park. So there's, in the master plan, there's more to it than just subsistence ag lots. We are working with the county regarding some development of water, as well as with a private developer. That one, we've put in about 1.4 million for some of the preliminary work in ag, as well as infrastructure. Next, Molokai, you know, we got two major projects. Next slide. One is to actually take those 40-acre lots, ag lots, and kind of chop them up and make them more palatable and more usable size lots, and make those awards. So we've budgeted about 3.5 million to put in the infrastructure to facilitate these scattered lot awards. Next slide. Oh, but that kind of shows you what we're looking to do. Like that one lot, we're breaking it into 4 lots, and yeah, it kind of lays out the different approaches we're using on some of the existing lots. Next slide. And then this is our agricultural subdivision, EVA, again using about 6 million. Again, I'd note that we're not limited to just residential. We're trying to, in the strategic plan, which involves about 20 projects, 14 of them deal residential, the balance are ag and pastoral. So in this one, this is obviously a ag project, which is part of the projects, or one of the projects that our commission approved under the strategic plan as requested by the legislature. Now we've budgeted about 6 million for the infrastructure. Next slide. That shows you the layout and lots. So let's see. Yeah, we're doing, again, environmental assessment, all that, we're doing that. You know, we're not bypassing any of that. Design, subdivision, as well as construction, we got about 30 million. And then the bottom shows you a tentative schedule with completion in late 2025. Next slide. On Lanai, that one is a little bit, well, that's moving forward. That again was one of the strategic plan approved projects. So we've allocated about $2 million. We're looking on that one to maybe work with the county. They have an adjacent project that they're trying to move forward with without success. So we have approached and are talking with them regarding not only combining, so it's a more attractive project for developers out there, but also maybe sharing in the costs and some of the infrastructure. So this one is moving along. And that's it. Let's see. Is there another slide? Is that it?
That was it.
Okay.
For the park, yeah.
Yeah, I think you got the matrix that kind of lays out the encumbered funds anticipated and projected. And if you notice, and taking into consideration your earlier comment about the deadline, and I'm assuming you were talking the end of 2024, not this year, right? That we can encumber.
The end of this fiscal year.
Yeah, 2024. Yeah, so in looking at that, if you look at the second page, we look to encumber about $681 million, even if we didn't get that extra year. And so even looking for the following year, we're looking to encumber, hopefully we got the extension, but we'd have run out of money all the way up to about over $800 million. So we're spending the money, so and I recognize this coming legislative session is going to be tough, but we are going to probably come in for more money as well as CIP money.
Great, thank you, Chair. This was a great presentation. Members, any questions? Rep. Tarnas, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I was very happy to see the progress you're making, Chair Watson, and it's important to carry out what we're trying to do on all the islands. And I appreciate your sensitivity on Maui. That's going to be really important. I do want to mention and check in with you. You had mentioned legislation you're hoping to get our support on, which is to get seats on the Commission on Water Resource Management on HCDA and HHFDC. When you mentioned this before, I urged you to try to get support within the administration and with CWRM and HCDA and HHFDC, and if they support having Hawaiian Homelands have a representative on their board, it's going to be easier for us to get the votes to move it out of the House. And I urge you to have those conversations with the administration, and so you can all be on the same page. It puts us in an awkward position if you're wanting one thing and the agency is saying no. And so I'm hoping that you'd be able to get some consensus so you can come back to us with that. So I just wanted to mention that again and see if you've had any of those conversations. Back to you, Chair.
Actually, I have. I've met with HHFDC and DBAD. I've talked with the governor indirectly and have gotten the support. So I am hopeful, and it really does make sense for me to be on all three of those boards. And so I believe, we actually did a legislative review with the governor's team, and that was presented. I didn't hear any pushback on the proposals. And you're right, we did, and unfortunately we didn't do that last year, and I wasn't around to really do that preliminary lobbying administratively. Well, this year I'm here, and this year I did. And so I'm hopeful that the governor, when he finally does approve the different proposed legislation, and I anticipate he will, allow us to do those three bills that we're submitting that will include me getting on these three boards, and hopefully you guys will likewise be supportive.
Thank you for that update, and yeah, I look forward to hearing that from the agencies, and then we can have our discussion within the House and within the committees that will be referred those bills. But that would, like I say, make it a whole lot more realistic for us to get the votes to move it through the House. So thank you for doing that work. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Tarnas. Any other questions online?
Oh, sorry.
Rep Ward? Oh, Rep Poi Poi, you have a question?
Oh, yes,
Go ahead.
thank you. Thank you, Director Watson and Chair Hashimoto. My question is about the housing emergency proclamation. I was really happy to hear you speak about, DHHL having that Malama Ana Kuleana as well. And I think the Chapter 343 and 6E, Environmental Impacts and Historic Preservation, those are really important to protecting our Native Hawaiian traditional cultural practices, burials, cultural sites, and Aina itself. But I also hear you about the slow SHPD process. So my question is, if the EP doesn't prove or end up being a tool that you, the beneficiaries, the commission, chooses to utilize, I'm just curious how much of an impact that will have on your timeline and your ability to expend the funds if you don't use an EP type tool. I guess I'm trying to figure out how dependent or non-dependent is DHHL on the EP or on an EP to get the funds expended.
Well, as you know, the funds just need to be encumbered rather than spent.
Encumbered, yeah.
So we should be able to encumber them, especially when we do the developer agreement. Part of it kind of lays out the encumbrance of funds, and that's how we've done, we encumbered quite a bit to date, especially on our Maui projects. So the any issue with the SHPD wouldn't, I'm assuming even the ones that are at issue right now, we're in the process of resolving. And so I don't think that would be fatal, but moving forward, that's I don't want to have that issue, especially if we can do it. We'll bring on staff and work with SHPD to make sure we're doing it right, but we will bring on staff that are very versed in the process, as well as sensitive and committed to preserving these archaeological and historical items. And but we can do it just, if not better, than SHPD, I believe. Especially, we are committed, we're dedicated, we have, under the program, I'm not going to in any way jeopardize the trust and commitment not only of our department, but more importantly, the community. And so we want to preserve and actually develop a trust that we're doing the right things, especially with respect to archaeological and sites and artifacts.
Okay, thank you. So the EP does not necessarily have an impact on the encumbrance of funds.
Well, as you know, the EV, you can, in an appropriate way, relocate it or consolidate it, but there's a certain protocol and process you got to go through, and that obviously we would follow. But typically, I don't like to relocate any EV. We invariably, in most cases, just leave it where it is.
Okay, thank you. I was talking about the emergency proclamation, EV.
No, I think that's been. I think I haven't looked at the final one. I think it's still being reviewed if it hasn't already been finished reviewed by the AG's office. But I think they put that back in. It's not waived.
That's correct.
Okay.
My understanding.
So,
Yeah.
so then my concern is relieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep Poi Poi. Rep Ward, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Kali, that was a very robust report. I'd like to see? I'd like to see a 2-3 minute video that our colleagues can see, people can see that this money is being spent well, and look at all the projects. I mean, that's just a suggestion, but I have two questions. If we look at the whole encumbrances, how many people are going to come off the wait list? I know you got them individually, but have you got a collective summary, cumulative total, so we know 600 million?
Well, this list is 3,776. But this list doesn't include some of these other projects we're looking at that I think we can generate a lot more. We are looking at going up, which is not on this list. The Bolodrome, while it's a rental, I'm trying to convert that into homestead condos. And I got to take a look at the response and market, as well as some legal issues regarding, based on the use of the funds, which are for rentals. Can you separate the vertical construction from the the land, which is what I'm trying to do, and award a homestead lease, undivided interest for the land. So you get a homestead lease, and which you can pass on to your heirs, versus waiting 15 years if there's a conversion. You might pass away before that. If your kid is only quarter Hawaiian, you're out. So that's something we're looking at, but also multi-units, and we're gonna try and get a little bit more dense production in our lands. So we're looking at a couple high-rise developments to see if the numbers work. But I also have to kind of see how the Bolodrome goes and what the response is on that. I think it's going to be positive if you have a good location.
So if I'm in a town hall meeting, they say, well, what did you guys do with the $600 million? We've got 376, can we say 4,000 people are coming off?
Yeah,
the
let's
list?
round off at 4,000.
4,000? That's safe to say, and
That's safe to say.
all the money has been encumbered. Plus,
Well, we
I think
propose,
we've gone
we,
over, actually.
I think we're going in for some release of some funds. What was that, 100?
We're doing 175 million for release.
Okay.
Next
But
quarter.
I think people will be very assured, because a lot of people didn't trust you were gonna use it and do it well, so that 3-minute video. But here, my last question is, or let's say my next question is, I guess a comment and a question that follows. Is there any way that Maui can be prioritized, sped up, given prioritization, given what it's doing? And I know a lot of that is, a lot of people think we're not doing enough, or we did it too slowly. And if you come in with something that's usually DHL slow, is there any way you can tip your hat to the Maui people or the Maui DHL using whatever you have in terms of the proclamation, or in terms of, the people are hurting so much, it would be a gesture of, look, we hear you, we're paying attention to you, and you've got the lots, you've got the money. Is there any way you can prioritize that rather than, I didn't see that as one of the, maybe top of the chart sort of things?
We're doing over 1,200 units on Maui collectively on the 4 projects that are moving forward. But the challenge, and we've encumbered 3 of the projects. Leali, we have some money for the infrastructure, so we're going to move forward on those. But 2 of them, the EA has already done, I believe, on 2 of them. One I think we or completed the process. And the other one we're doing the Leali, we're finishing that one up. We're not going to circumvent or bypass that. And then the Waihuli, not the Waihuli, but the Wai'ehu project. What's the status of the environment on that?
The Waiahu project still needs to go through an Chapter 343 process. There was an earlier EA that was done, but I think that is in some form of litigation right now. So we need to see how we can maneuver through that process.
I guess my point is that if there's any way you can fast track the Maui, when we go into session in January, we're going to be talking a lot about Maui. Even with funds, I'm not sure how that's all going to play out, but it's something where in 1992, when Iniki hit, everything that they needed was on the table, and the legislature gave it. I'm probably the only one who's here that was here in 92. But if you've got an ask that's related to the Maui fires, I would say start structuring it and get it ready to tee up, because that's going to be a big discussion in January. And if you can fast track it, if it costs a little bit more money, I think we got to really give Maui the right of way to. We're genuinely going to rebuild, commit, and make them complete and whole.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're doing is, not only in our development agreements, and especially the number of units involved, there is going to be a challenge because there's other projects being built too, and the rebuilding of the 2,200 units that were destroyed.
Shortages all over the state.
There's going to be a labor shortage, so it's going to be very, very costly. But we're okay with the developers bringing in workers from outer islands or other islands of Oahu, whatever, and obviously you're gonna have to pay more. We do have about, I believe, 1,400 homesteaders on that island that we're gonna work with them to create ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. And so that would, in part, address some of the housing needs. These would be, so we're using some of our NAHAZA funds for that, independent of the 271 because, or 279, because they are rentals.
Have you
But
asked
we-
FEMA for any of the ADUs? They've got all.
Well,
huge-
we're okay on the NAHAZA is, for the last 2 years, we've gotten 22.3 million, and then just recently, it looks like we'll get another 22.3 million. So those funds, which are designed for rentals, provides a pretty good source of funding that we can move forward on that program. So I have tasked and brought on an individual that's specifically tasked with that, working with the homesteaders. We're working with Hawaiian Community Lending, as well as some of the smaller Native Hawaiian contractors, to really get that moving. So when you say, we're giving we're actually going across the board throughout the state and giving priority to all the, we got 29,000 people on our waiting list, and they're dying on all the different islands, not
So
just
Maui's
Maui.
hurting, crying, and weeping more than I think any, well, all those on the wait list are in grieving state, so to speak, but the ones on Maui, I only say that as a suggestion, but that's what I'm hearing from the people, that we're not doing
sure,
what we should be
sure.
doing, and fast enough and enough.
That was part of the reason for the emergency proclamation, but, we're gonna be very cautious and sensitive to some of the issues that were raised in these, that last
Yeah.
hearing. And so, especially on the cultural, environmental, we're not gonna sidetrack any of that, and we shouldn't. As our department, we are very sensitive to the cultural side.
Thank you.
All right.
I have later,
All right, members, any other questions?
I do have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Carly, in the Prince Kohio, and I like you put his face on the front of it, he said not only we're gonna put Hawaiians on the homestead, on the land, but we're also gonna make a degree of economic independence of the Hawaiian community. Do you have any entrepreneurial or business or other visions within
Mhm.
the department to get that side of the Kohio vision for Hawaiians to become economic independent on the, or using the HHL lands?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just in a meeting with the individual I'm gonna bring on that's really focusing on development. He's done it in private as well as used to work for HCDA. And we've already identified about 20 sites that we're gonna really move forward on the development, especially the large parcels, 150 acres or 43 acres. And we're gonna similarly use our RFQ process to identify developers that not only can develop it from a commercial standpoint, but also familiar with and is receptive to working with the different elite trusts, just like how we did in the Nanakuli Village Center, where we worked with Kamehameha. They put in the Kalani Ho'okaha Cultural Learning Center, worked with another developer that did a LIHTC rent-to-own, not rent-to-own, but a LIHTC, 48 units, 14.5 mil, but we were able to access all these different funding to get that built. And then in the front, we got a couple medical clinics. We worked with Waianae Comp, that put in a satellite clinic. We worked for Fresenius, put in a renal clinic. We got an inline space where we got some Native Hawaiian business enterprise guys there, along with the CVS Long, the Starbucks, Taco Bell and Wendy's. And, that money that's generated from that venture goes to support the Nanakuli Homestead Community Association for their programs. So yeah, we're looking at more of those. That was a 12-acre parcel. We got parcels throughout the state that we're gonna use that approach to develop. And working with the community, like working with the Shah, they looking at doing some transitional housing. We're working with all the different, including OHA, to do multi-service centers like we did in Molokai, the Kulana Uivi. So we're gonna do those too on the different islands. So yeah, it's not just vertical construction, we're doing a lot more.
CNHA, you didn't mention yet.
CNHA, we're working with those guys too. They might end up becoming a developer. They hired a developer that is good at development, so they've got some money and they wanna get into the development, but initially when they approached me, I said, well, you guys aren't developers. Well, they brought somebody on that is a developer, so I'm excited about working with those guys too.
In your Kapolei shopping center, how many Hawaiian entrepreneurs are in the Makana Ali?
Well, we got the, one is a surf shop, one is gonna be a poke bowl. We're looking at maybe working with Waina at CDFI, we're still debating on that one.
I mean, your existing shopping center.
Yeah, existing.
Oh,
Oh, you're
still-
talking about the Kamakani Ali?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that one, I'm not
What-
sure, I didn't build that
Do you know
one.
the percent, that would be helpful to know as a forerunner of what in the future is.
I think CNHA is in there, if I'm not mistaken. I don't, you know, I can go get that info for you, but I don't know.
I mean, there's kind of an economic renaissance
Mhm.
that's going on, that you guys provide retail spaces. Super.
Well, the money from that one in part goes to the CDFI that's made up of the 4 different homestead associations, and they use that for their programs. And we just opened up like a neighborhood shopping center right next to our, close to our admin building, and that generates money also for the association. And then they've got a couple community facilities in back of our admin building that they want to expand, so. We're working with the different associations, like in Waimea, Mike, what's his name, Mike Hudson, he's doing a good job. He kind of followed our approach that we did in the Nanakuli Village Center, and so he's using that to build a nice multi-service center along with other things.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I guess question from me, so when we're taking a look at your projected FY24 encumbrances, and so this is what we should expect then for your FY24 projects, that's going to be looked at, or is it still in the planning phases that you might add additional projects?
We're gonna add additional projects. We put out a second RFQ, RFP, and how many projects?
There were like 18.
18 projects. We might even put out a third one. I mean, we've been approached by others that have really great lands, even better. And so it's kind of an ongoing process. And you know, while we're moving forward with 5 different RFQs, the Maili, the Laiopua, Hanapepe, as well as the Lalamilo, there's others that might come to the fore just because they're, you know, shovel ready almost. And,
Right.
we can leverage our money and move forward on
So,
those.
so is the strategy to then push some of these projects out, or what is the thought process?
You know, it's an ongoing process.
Okay.
So I have a lot of staff that, as well as we're meeting with the different proposers. You know, one proposer has offered 2 different high-rises. So we got to take a look at his funding approach and whether that makes sense. So, yeah, I'm not prepared to say, okay, these are the projects that we're going. It's kind of you know, kind of juggling and whatever makes sense.
Yeah, because I know some of these that you have, even though you push it to FY24, it likely probably won't get done in
Probably.
24, so you probably
Yeah.
keep pushing.
We've substituted something else.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I was wondering where we are going with, I noticed in the FY24, you still have about 165 million in private financing partnerships, individual assistance, project management, and staffing. So I think, is that something, well, especially the project or the individual assistance, is that something that's still in the works, or is that potentially fungible and you're going to move that to other stuff?
We're, even the loan programs, as
Mhm.
well as how we can either buy the interest down and what have you, that's an ongoing process.
Okay.
And then even the encumbered funds, some of the infrastructure, for example, the Honokawai project, the money that's encumbered for the water development, we're working with our congressional delegation to get some substitute money, so that might be freed up. Regarding, you know, even the land acquisitions, we might increase that budget line because there's more parcels that we need to acquire that are really easily and a lot better for development. So that is an ongoing process. We actually have 4 projects that we've vetted that we think would be excellent. Both those are land acquisitions. And some of them are, you know, combo land acquisition and development.
Mhm.
But the initial ones are just land acquisitions. And we've got about, I don't know, 12 more we're going to vet to see whether we want to do land and development with the proposer.
Right. Okay. So I guess it seems like there's a level of confidence that the 600 will get
yeah.
encumbered then. Okay. So I guess the next question is then what, and I know you're gonna have to go through the commission with this, but I think at some point, what we should get an understanding of what the ballpark ask is for the upcoming fiscal budget of what is it that you're looking for, right? Because you're going over, right? You're in projected 25, you're already asking for 122, 530. So I think we're
Yeah, we're looking at over 200 million already.
right. So I think what we'll need to get figure out is, is that what the ask is, or, is it going to be another number? And of course, I'm sure as you add more projects, things will move, especially from this RFP. Because does this include anything from the new RFP?
No, not on this one.
Okay.
But yeah, it's evolving. I mean, that number is actually going to go up as we get more projects. But I hope it's one source, but hopefully the CIP portion.
Right.
We're going to go in with a number on that one too.
Right.
Under sufficient funds.
And then of course you have your NAHASDA funds and all
We
that.
got the NAHASDA, we're
Yeah.
pushing on that, and that one, that's why it's so important that, and we've got a bunch of projects lined up on that one, that we can show to our congressional delegation that we can spend the money.
Right.
And that has been a problem in the past and currently.
Right.
So that's changing because we've already identified maybe 10 sites. We're gonna do this Kupuna transitional housing project.
Okay. Good. Can you remind us what the 175 request for release is slated for?
Sure, thank you. So that includes Lanai residence lots, that's for $2 million design contract for off-site water infrastructure. We have also requesting the 11.9 million Calpea Phase 2. The negotiations are still in progress, and I just want to apologize that some of the numbers don't really sync up, so you might see some differences with lot counts and dollar amounts to be encumbered.
Okay.
Let's see, we're also requesting the release of East Kapolei 2 Master Plan Community, 109 million. And we're also requesting 26.6 million Eva Villages, the Paseco property. And 14.3 million Wailua, the mill camp development. Those are the projects that comprise $175 million request to release funds. So that number might be tweaked a little bit, but it's roughly around at that $175 million level.
And so those are ready to go under contract then, all of those?
Ready to go and soon to be ready to go.
Okay, good.
Sure.
Yep, just a sec, Rep. Board. Anyone else online? Questions? Rep. Tarnas, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to circle back with you, Chair Watson, about your conversations with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs about potential cooperative projects with housing. You had brought that up before, and I'm very interested in that, and I think Office of Hawaiian Affairs would be interested. Could you fill us in a little bit more on any additional discussions, or if it's too early, then next time you can fill us in?
Well, I've been planting seeds all over the place at these different elite trusts, and one of them was the idea of joining with us in acquiring some lands that are ready to go, that are already entitled, but they buy the land rather than we buy it, whereby if it's already entitled and they can build on it, then not only acquire the land on your own, but maybe combine it with lands that we're going to develop adjacent. And so instead of 200 units being built, we got 500. So we can get a developer that will then do and develop the units at a lower per unit cost. And then more importantly, OHA can go in and seek funding either from the legislature or the RD or this other DOT, similar to what we're doing independently. They don't need to, and they have the same access to these infrastructure costs, including loan products. It doesn't have to be on Hawaiian homelands. So if OHA were to address the less than 50% Hawaiians, I mean, that would be great not only for the Hawaiian people, but more importantly, that OHA could start doing development. Presently, they give us some money, they pay for the bond costs on some of the stuff that we've done, which is great. But I think I'm trying to push them to maybe develop on their own. And so while we're restricted to who we can lease to or sell to, they would have the ability, with certain restrictions and requirements, to maybe address the people on the wait list that are less than, not on the wait list, but in their beneficiary base that are less than 50% Hawaiians. So it'd be, I think, a great partnership. We are looking at working with them on kupuna housing and transitional housing. Clearly, they can, and we've had some good conversations on that, and we've actually identified some sites on Molokai as well as on this island. And I just it looks like we'll do a deal on Kauai. So that's another way they can participate. The multi-service centers, that's a no-brainer. They can participate in those. So we're also looking at maybe asking them to put up money for the Habitat loan program. When I was chair way back before, they put up $10 million in a loan program for Habitat participants. Because we're going to be getting very active with Habitat, that might be another way they could participate in development. They could also maybe provide loan down payment assistance for some of the people that are in that gap that can really qualify for the turnkey but need a little bit of assistance. That would be very helpful. If they wanna, they also have the ability to build projects under Chapter 10, which exempts them from taxation at the state, county, and municipal level. And so, can you imagine doing a project, a OHA project, whether it's a raceway park or a warehouse or a gas station that didn't have to pay that kind of taxes? That'd make it very, very viable, which they can do. They've never done it, but again, the idea is planting seeds in their most of the trustees that I've met with that they might want to consider. We've identified some specific projects that they can participate. So I'm very hopeful that they will step up and get active. They seem very, very interested. So I'm excited about developing that relationship.
Great. I'm very excited to hear about these potential cooperative arrangements that you just discussed, and I would encourage you to keep going with that. And I will encourage Office of Hawaiian Affairs to do the same. So keep up those conversations. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Rep. Poipo, you have anything? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that, just for context maybe, after the Maui fires, DHHL did put forth Maui projects for consideration, and I think this is in response to Rep. Ward's comments. Those were put forward under the Emergency Housing Proclamation, and it was on the agenda, and it received substantial testimony expressing concern and asking for minimal conditions to be met at least, including things like reinstating the water code and sunshine law and preference in awarding. So I think it's just important that we remember to be cautious and considerate of how our ideas or how we think things should move forward, especially in Maui, and listen to what the people are saying of that place and to hear those concerns. And I think a lot of those concerns did come from beneficiaries in the Native Hawaiian community, and I think Director Watson was very considerate of that in removing the items from the Build Beyond Barriers agenda, and I think now working a little bit more cautiously to move forward, and still moving forward, but just with caution. I think that was the appropriate response. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
I agree with you 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Poipoi. Last questions, Rep. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. In your presentation, you mentioned the Habitat for Humanity 3 times, and then just 2 minutes ago, you mentioned it twice again. The question is, how much money have you saved the people of Hawaii by working with them?
Well, it's more,
Self-help, basically,
it's
right?
more saving the participant money. You know, they can use their sweat equity to get their mortgage down to significant, and then I believe they have a loan program with zero interest. You know, so the whole idea, and you know, they have certain income restrictions on being able to participate. So again, it's the people on my wait list that, you know, can't afford the turnkey, and they would be very helpful.
Which is exactly what you said in the first 5 minutes of your presentation. It's $400,000 for the house, $200,000 for the infrastructure. That's not low cost or affordable housing in Hawaiian or other communities, or maybe much so than the 1.1 or 1.2 million that we're doing. Is there any way you can get, this is about $300 a square foot that you're paying? That's market value. I mean,
Well, that's one reason why we're doing large numbers, to get the per unit costs down. We're also looking at doing our own design plans to bring standardization, you know, the same size windows, the doors, and so we can mass order. And we're looking at, in our industrial park, building warehouses to, you know, store a lot of this advanced ordered material. But by standardization, large quantities, large production, we should be able to get the per unit cost down. It's an ongoing process, but it's very standard and has been used other areas, especially in California, to get the per unit cost down. We're looking at using Sept's approach regarding the structural insulated panels, which reduce the labor from the carpentry standpoint. Working with the Carpenters Union, which has been supportive, at least they're on this one project on Kauai. So we're looking at, even on the roof truss systems, is reduced significantly by using this Sept's approach. So again, the construction approach, the materials, the per unit, and as well as the standardizations on the plans, all of those are some of the things that we're doing to get the costs down.
someone who rags on me, I would suggest me give you some advice. That's Peter Savio, who said, we can do low cost housing, we just don't have the will to do it. And the profit that's going to the developers is too much, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, he thinks they can come down somehow. Hopefully we can do that. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Rep. Ward. Rep. Holt.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you, Chair, and to the staff, all the staff members, and whoever's watching. I appreciate all the work you guys have done. I know a lot of people have had worries about us spending the money, and I appreciate that we're at 800 million. I look forward to working on getting you guys that extra 200 and more, so we can continue to build. You know, I think it's a lot of unfair criticism the department has been getting for not being able to build stuff, but you guys never had money. So now that we actually have some money and you guys can actually prove that we're building stuff, I think it's a good example, and I hope that everybody's paying attention, so going forward that we can continue to help you guys push out these units. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, members, so I think what the timeline is looking like is this working group is going to have to issue a report before the legislative session begins. So I think we're planning on having at least 2 more meetings, so at least we can firm up what your lists
Sure.
look like, where projects are, and then we'll issue that report likely late November, early December, in time for the legislative session. And of course, we'll continue to reconvene as we get closer into the session. But I think what might be helpful too is if you have, you spoke of some legislative proposals. If there's something that's notable, I think we should know about it, because we can include it into the report to make sure our colleagues know that it is of importance that this working group has flagged. And so I think I understand you have your own process having to go through the governor, but I think knowing how we can help you, it would be very, very good. So maybe that next meeting we can talk a little bit more about legislation, and then get an update on, of course, any changes in the project status, and then we can kind of go from there. Yes, Rep. Ward.
Is there any kick the tire tours that we're going to be able to see one of these in the flesh sort of thing? Was that ever planned, or are we just going to do readings across the table? Not on site is the question. We don't have any
We can talk with them about that. I don't know if you have anything in the pipeline that's about at that point, but we can talk to see if there's anything available we can take a physically look at, but we'll take that under advisement. So with no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.